As a kid, I would sit and look at sports result books and be like, oh, in 1901, Celtic beat Vale of Leithen in the Scottish Cup final. So now it's just doing it in a professional environment.
Man, I should take you to Vegas. When that problem came to you and you started digesting it, what was that initial reaction?
How do you even remotely start that? Okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to be bored, which is the bane of my existence. A lot of the times it's like, hey, here's the problem. It's well-defined. Go and solve it. This was a case of nobody even knows what the problem is.
Data unification, obviously, is very important today. What are you trying to unify and why? What's the end result?
The first phase is always understanding what data you have out there. And then the next phase is, okay, and how do we get it?
Data can tell a story. So getting the snackable, I love the word snackable, right? It's like, can you understand what is actually going on with your business?
An episode where Homer becomes a vigilante and he's interviewed and says,
oh, people can come up with statistics to prove anything can't. 40% of all people know that.
And it's the same. If you just provide people all data, they'll just look into it until they find the piece they want.
We're back for another episode of Hospitable. And today's kind of fun. This is going to be, I think, a very, fun discussion on a topic that some people, if you're out there listening, are going to absolutely love. Some be like, what the hell is this? But my guest today is Kyle McCaig. He is the Director of Technology for MCR, which is the third largest property management company in the United States. In his previous lives, he's ran his own company as a consultant. He's worked at big companies. He's worked at small companies, all in the IT field. And somehow ended up in hospitality. And then in his role into hospitality, got thrown a curveball of a big problem of we have 180 something hotels.
About that, yeah.
180 hotels, and we want our data to be unified. Go.
Pretty much. Yeah. That's about right. Yeah.
Right? So that's what we're going to talk about today is this challenge of data unification, because we know, and it's kind of a hot topic in hospitality, is especially with mergers, acquisitions, all these hotels, all these brands, is how to unify data when you have multiple PMS sources. The average hotel uses 8 to 10 cloud-based systems. Average restaurants
if you host cloud-based systems. A lot of them are on-prem.
Well, we're going to get there. Average restaurant uses 5 to 6, 7 cloud-based systems. And then in the States specifically, we have a lot of on-prem legacy users, which is the bane of our existence.
Yep.
So I want to get into this process of data unification and talk about what it means to unify data and some of the challenges faced and how you're tackling those challenges at MCR, because I think it's really cool how you've been able to approach it. When I came and visited you, and you literally on a whiteboard had all of your systems, and with your back to it, we're just naming all of it. And I was just like, this is fucking intense. So talk about the problem. Like when that problem came to you and you started digesting it, what was that initial reaction to that curveball?
It's a good one. Part really like, how do you even remotely start that? And part, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to be bored, which is the bane of my existence. As soon as I'm bored, I know I'm struggling like at that point. And trying to work out, a lot of the times it's like, hey, here's the problem. It's well-defined. Go and solve it. There may be no solution, and that might take a long time. This was a case of nobody even knows what the problem is, other than that there's a problem.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. So the vast majority of the first however many months was, let's go find out what data we have.
Yeah.
Where it exists, who has it. Legally, do we even own it? Like, what's important data?
Yeah.
What's data that exists but is utterly irrelevant? And not only should we not bother trying to get it together, we should stop paying for whatever is generating it. And I've worked in hospitality on the kind of digital side 8-9 years ago. And since then, have been in multiple different industries, but the industries have generally been modern, I guess, as an overview topic word for it.
APIs in the cloud.
Yeah, and then like the vast majority of you're working with, it's either a startup, which doesn't have a whole lot of debt in terms of data or technology, but also doesn't have a lot of like unknowns because someone was there at the start, so they may have at least a little bit of tangential knowledge about it. In this case, we're a company who, okay, the company's been around 20, 30 years in a few different guises in the start, but some of the hotels have been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of the systems have been around since 250 AD. Like, I don't know, some of these things. Some of the modern ones look like they're from war games. Like, so a lot of it was just, and since then, I've met at various different conferences and things like that, people who have legitimately created companies and their job is data detection, essentially. And I'm like, oh, you would have been great 2 years ago. Like, because now I don't know how much you're going to find. Like, we can do a little project together, but they're finding 3 or 4 sources as opposed to 80 sources that would have been helpful. And then the other big challenge is that if you're working with startups or data companies, they're set up with one of the core tenets being provide data to the people who need it, as well as security. When we're working with legacy and brand companies, it's not that they're unwilling necessarily to provide data. And a lot of times it's your data. Of course, they're willing to give it to you, but they were not ever built in a way where that was a core tenet.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really important piece, is that the older systems weren't, like when you got on a legacy system, you were going to be there forever. Like there was not really a thought of, well, what happens if they change and how does that data get transferred? Mm-hmm. What does unification look like? You know, a PMS is a PMS is a PMS, but you and I both know, and most of the people that listen to the show know, that it's not. I mean, yeah, there's the same functionality, it does the same thing, but the way that the data gets spit out, the way that it gets mapped into its accounting platform, the way that you leverage that data at the line level to the executive level, all makes a difference. And I think when you start thinking of 80 plus different source systems, that gets very overwhelming very quickly. For sure. And a lot of the time it was either built for a hotel management company, so, you know, a Hilton, a Marriott, or a large property management where everything was going to be the same. Yeah. I don't think the concept was ever even considered that it would be almost like a franchise owner who may have multiple across, which is now common. Very common. But very few of these systems, there wasn't even, at the back of somebody's mind when they were designing it. So it was just, hey, we need somewhere for this information to be that isn't paper or a book of hopefully the guest name and how much they paid, and then it gets lost and then you have no record. So they were solving a problem, and some of them did better than others. Some of them were quite good. Some of them were terrible from the start. But a lot of them have kind of been victims of their own success, where they worked well. Yeah. So they allowed super growth in usage, meaning that it's then very difficult to resolve these kind of new modern problems come across. Because if you've got a PMS that runs 200 hotels, you can come up with a new hotel PMS and implement it, and it's a little annoying. If you're doing it for 25,000 hotels, a lot of times the concept is you can't. They don't think they can. So you run into that fairly major issue, and all there is at best kind of band-aids or like quick fixes or cowboy code to just put in place and like, oh, this will get you what you want. And you're like, no, it really doesn't. It gets me like a screenshot of a report. Like, that's really not helpful. And when you think about like 180 plus hotels with, and as you said, different brands, MCR has some really cool hotels and brands under their umbrella, from Marriott's to Hilton's to, the infamous, I love the TWA hotel here at JFK, and now expanding internationally with London, right? Yeah, the BT Tower. BT Tower. So, it's really exciting, but also like, okay, how do we process all that? And it's something that I think, from being a problem solver is I think is definitely fun for you. And the way that you're able to, like, when we were in the room together and you had, was it like 85 different systems? And I think, we went through and you're like, this connects to this and this, all out of your brain. I was like, there's no way that this man is doing this right now. But I'm sure you look at it so much that it's just like second nature, probably mumble it in your sleep at night.
There's that, but there's also, honestly, like, as a kid, I would sit and look at sports result books and be like, oh, in 1901, Celtic beat Vale of Leven in the Scottish Cup final 2-0, and McBride scored both of them. And now I know that's true. Like, I still remember this. So now it's just doing it in a professional environment.
Man, I should take you to Vegas.
Yeah. But, you tell me, like, you ask who I was in a meeting with 3 weeks ago, and I'd be like, there was a meeting 3 weeks ago? So, it's not all good.
Yeah, true. Very true. So, and I think this is really cool. And, being part of MCR, Omnibus has been brought in to help with the data unification, which is something we talk about all the time, being a data unification platform. And we've embarked on this kind of journey together. Once you got all the heavy lifting done as far as like trying to understand your source systems. So as you look at MCR and 180 hotels, and you're trying to make heads and tails of the data, what is the data unification? Obviously, is very important in today's society and ecosystem. But it's really easy to say. What are you trying to unify and why? What's the end result?
Yeah.
And how is that going to better the hotel operations at the front line, but also at the executive level where MCR sits?
Yeah, and it's, in some ways, the challenge is unique for the industry. And in some ways, it's very similar to similar challenges I've had in other industries and other companies, where the first phase is always understanding what data you have out there. And then the next phase is, okay, and how do we get it? And then the third one, and the unification piece of it is, and how do we normalize it or make it even remotely helpful? And a term that gets thrown around in hospitality is stratification. But people will often they'll miss the big picture of, well, why does it matter? Like, if you're not going to use the data when you've got it, then it was a fool's errand. And there's, we're talking before this about The Simpsons, and there's an episode where Homer becomes a vigilante, and he's interviewed on their equivalent of Fox News and says, oh, statistics can be used to prove anything. 68% of people know that. And it's the same. If you just provide people all data, they'll just look into it until they find the piece they want.
Yeah.
So, and people who've listened in the past will have hopefully listened to the one with Jacob Messina, where I was in a meeting with him and our CEO Tyler Morse, where he used the term snackable for content, and it's a term that's been used for your TikToks and your Reels, and it is. You think a 3-4 minute instruction video used to be like the height of brilliance because you didn't have to go through a 500-page manual. Now people have got the attention span of a gnat, so it's 15 seconds. So a lot of what we're doing is not just getting data and then providing an Excel doc of thousands of pieces of data, millions of pieces of data, which isn't actually helpful unless you're an Excel wizard and a data analyst.
Yeah.
It's, okay, get it, normalize it, and then provide the actual data and the trends and the reporting and the sometimes visualizations, what you need, to the people who actually need it so that they can actually make data-driven decisions. Yeah. People talk about it all the time, but what they actually mean is just backing up what they already decided with any data they can find to support it. We don't want to do that. We want to be like, okay, you're a GM. Here is how your property did in revenue. Here's how your property did in expenses. You're a CEO. Here's how your entire company did. Here's some problem areas. You're in charge of dealing with utilities for 150, 180, 500 franchises or whatever it happens to be. Here's all of that information and some red lines and some green lines and things like that. So that's what we've been trying to do. And we're at various stages. Basically, as soon as we find data, it's like, wait, you have an open API? All right, 20 minutes later, we have the data and we can start presenting it out. Oh, you can maybe send us an Excel doc that's unstructured? Okay, maybe in 6 months, we might have something good here. But the end goal is really getting the skill positions, that I like to call it, the information they need to do their job best.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a couple of key topics there, so we'll kind of break them down. But I think it's easy to talk about buzzwords in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Data unification, data-driven decisions. Like those have been buzzwords for the last half decade, if not a full decade.
And in every industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you make a good point about data can tell a story, and you can leverage data in multiple ways to tell the story you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
So getting the snackable, I love the word snackable, right? It's like in a quick look, whatever that parameter may be, can you understand what is actually going on with your business? And, we see it from sales functions all the time. There's always these Salesforce KPIs or whatever your CRM KPIs, reporting structure. The mark of it is a good process is when you look at that, can you understand how the business is doing, how your reps are doing, and with a quick glance, understand what your pipeline looks like? If you can't, then why do you have it? Right? And that's like a watered down singular version. Expand that across 180 hotels, different brands or systems, and different functions. And that's where that's why I love this project. And obviously I get to be on the inside of it, working with you all as we help with unification, we're helping with data like data warehouse, the automation, AI tools that we're using to source that data, taking those big sources of unstructured data. And what we do well is creating structured to unstructured data into those different flows. So it's been interesting to see, but I think it's really impactful how you kind of highlighted this, the buzzword and all these tools that kind of show it versus cool, but why are we doing it? And the why behind it is very important when we talk about data and how we want to leverage it, because if it's data for data's sake, well, makes no sense.
Yeah. And you can see it doesn't even have to be at professional or a mass level. I see like patterns and do things in real life all the time and be like, oh, weird. And maybe just 30 seconds goes through my head, and then 10 years later I go, oh, hang on. But your local power or gas company, whatever, in Long Island it's PSEG, they'll be like, hey, here's your usage. And I'll be like, you provided me loads of data for absolutely no reason. Like, what am I, as the person who has to pay the bill? I've not a choice.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And then they start being like, oh, you could do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, well, now there's a point to what you provided. It's like, oh, try this to reduce your power. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see where you're going from here. And it got a little better there. And so when you extrapolate that to a large organization or even a small organization, that piece is often missing.
Yeah.
Where it's just, and especially if you're talking about like an on-property leader, a GM at one property, they're expected to be the jack of all trades, but they're also expected to be the master of all of those trades. And that's impossible. And a lot of times it's like, oh, here's all of the information you need. And they're like, I don't have time to analyze this. I don't necessarily know what it means. I don't have time to go and research all of this means or even know where to go to find that out. So again, it's got to be targeted for a reason. You shouldn't be trying to lead someone down certain ways because of the data, but you should be like, here is the snapshot that you need to see.
Yeah.
And one of the kind of challenges, one of the things we initially looked at when we were trying to do this is there are now companies out there who claim to unify all the data and provide it to you, but they're putting their filter and their spin on it. And not going to name them because didn't really have great experiences with any of them, but the ones that are out there that listeners will probably know of have conned people in to come in to use these, where they're just like, hey, it's this, this, and this. And that's the approach we didn't want to take. Is it an improvement on having 80 different sources for 100 and however many is at the time properties? Yes, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. All of a sudden, you're now giving people dashboards of information they still don't understand.
Yeah.
So our approach was, okay, well, let's own our own data and bring in a partner who will work for us and with us to get what we actually want, which is a single source of data that's normalized in numerous different ways. And then we can work on automation and reporting, and to people who actually need it, access to the data in a usable format.
Hi, we're OmniBoost. No, I mean, a little bit of tongue in cheek, but that's I think a really eloquently way said of what the mission is of our data insights team and why we actually launched a whole data insights and data projects team, which you've obviously worked very closely with and built out. And I think the intriguing part and the thing that I love, and I get to talk to a lot of these really cool hoteliers and getting in the space. I think I joined the hospitality space. We joined about the same time in the last year, really full on hospitality in a different way that we're in our roles and talking about these different challenges and really around this, like everyone's like data. And it's the one tool to roll them on. It's like, well, the one tool to roll them all at the end of the day comes down to your accounting system and making sure your books are in order. And then everything else works back off of that, which is why we started those with getting all the accounting systems in the stack and then built backwards. But this really cool thing about the data piece that I love talking to people about is like, cool, that's all good and all, but what is the reason that you need X? And when you start asking that question, that's where you start to see people like, well, we need it because of reporting. Okay. What exactly do you need that report for? What is that piece of data? What is that report doing to make your job easier?
Yeah.
What is that doing to make your job more efficient? What is that? And I think y'all solving that challenge at that level is really cool. So when you think about solving that, and like that's the challenge you're trying to solve and what we're working on, what was your biggest fuck moment? Like, oh shit, what did I get myself into?
Yeah. So it's an interesting one because what I discovered in a lot of times is there were like maybe 3 people who were the recipients of, whether it was a report, raw data, an email that was irrelevant, garbage out of somebody's mind, that actually knew what this was for. And it was like, oh, great, I got all this information. And they're like, oh, cool, I'll look at this, I'll look at this, I'll look at this. I'll fire off an email to this person because there's an action item. That's good to know. I'll file this here. Other people were looking at it, and when you asked them why, they were like, oh, well, it gets sent, and the CEO sends it, so I guess I should read it. And you're like, well, how is that remotely helpful? And it's more like protectionism rather than actually trying to use it and improve.
Yeah.
Not criticizing anybody's ways of doing work or anything. It's just not how my brain works necessarily. I'll look at some things that get sent to me and be like, irrelevant, delete.
Yeah.
Which I'm hopeful that anything I've worked on and are sending out, people aren't doing that because either I've messed up, that person shouldn't be getting it, and in which case, they're in wrong distribution lists or recipient lists. Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges was first to understand who needed what and what the end result was for. And a lot of the time, asking the person who received it wasn't helpful.
Yeah.
But once we managed to kind of dive past some of those, and we're like, okay, why does all of the data need to come from PMSs about revenue and expenses and taxes and the other things that like hospitality books and P&Ls need to include? And once we finally worked out the key ones of those, it was really, what is our bottom line? Yeah. Is the number one is, are we making money at each hotel? Are we making money as a company? And that then filters down to, oh, we're not here.
Yeah.
Is there data that can provide answers to why, or at least enough where they can look at it, analyze it, and go, oh, that's why. We need to spend more on marketing. We need to cut costs and we're overstaffing or whatever it happens to be. And what it really came down to is the biggest, well, how the fuck do we fix that? Was our accounting system wasn't up to what we needed it to be, didn't have all the information in it, and was either designed for a much smaller company or just not designed.
Yeah.
Depending on various different use cases. And it's easy to say in hindsight, like it's 2020, whereas trying to envision what you're going to need 15 years down the line is very difficult. But that was our biggest issue, where we were like, is the information in our current accounting system accurate?
Yeah.
the closest to a affirmative answer I got to that was probably. And I'm like, well, what the And so honestly, we're switching up everything our accounting system does and everything the way it works. And it had to go straight back to the raw data, how it's currently processed, where it goes to, how is reporting, is the information that certain people are getting remotely accurate? Newsflash, no. And how do we fix that so it's going into an accounting system that actually works and has the right information? And day by day we find, oh, well, there's revenue coming that is not accounted for anywhere.
Yeah.
Or bills or what happens to be. And that was the real challenge, which I had to essentially go and work out what hospitality financial accounting was and how it works and do all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I am no accountant by any means, but I now have an understanding of how it works and how it definitely should not work, which it's got us somewhere.
Yeah, that's a pretty big, huge kind of oh shit moment, and one that I think's being, obviously I know the kind of solution and the fix and what we're working on, when I think when it's all said and done, going to be much better. And I think, and I really like how you said this, right, is when you're starting to do data-driven results, it's easy to think of, okay, and you see these systems that are like, oh, this is reporting to help with optimization of X. Optimization of X is great if your base layer is there. Mm-hmm. And, I used to run a sales agency back in the day, so I always kind of take it back to sales. One of the things is my best kind of base layer, but one of the things when I was working with a lot of companies, when I was working as a consultant, I'd go into these companies and look at their sales machine, what they were using, their data, how they're leveraging a CRM and building out kind of pipelines, right? And as a salesperson myself, who hates to track everything, bane of my existence, is when you don't have the raw data correctly populated in your system, optimization of X means absolutely nothing. Yeah. And so many times the biggest issues with most organizations on their sales side is that they either did not set up their CRM properly, did not populate properly, or have their sales team not leveraging the power of the tool so that their base data is not right. So the reports are all off and the reports are telling a false story. Yeah. And I think the cool thing that you've done is you went back to, okay, are we profitable or not? And then it's okay, let's build out, how do we solve that problem? Where are we not profitable? Why? And then once we figure that out, it's okay, what kind of data can we give them to, hey, this is our path to profitability? And those are the kind of things that I know you're working on, the challenges that you're solving. And I think that is what the industry needs to do more of. It's not just optimize data. Like we even use data unification platform. Omnibus is a data unification platform. But I always have to take a step back. What does that actually mean and why? Yeah. Right? Because data unification is a buzzword. We are a data unification platform and there's a whole reason and story behind it, but you have to go back to that why, right? Simon Sinek. And I think it's really important. Why I love chatting with you on this topic is it took you a long time to figure out the why of it all and like crux through all the data and all the systems, and then which systems can we remove, which systems can we replace, how do we merge all that, what do we do with all the data to own the data, and then how do we keep like a base level and a manipulative level and all those things, right? We can get super technical, we're not going to. But the problem is if you're out there and when you're setting up your PMS, when you're setting up your accounting systems, when you're setting up your point of sale, you need to have that base level understanding of what we need and why. Set that up right the first time. That will save so many problems that our support team sees down the line, all these things. So I think it's a really cool way to look at it. And it's kind of fun to hear how your brain works on it when you weren't like by nature hospitality. Like you and I didn't come in this industry, growing up in the industry like some of the other folks did. And I think that also gave us fresh eyes to solve a very different problem.
For sure. Yeah. There's, and this isn't unique to hospitality industry. Like any industry I've been in is you need people who are that industry expert so that they know all the bells and whistles and the dirty secrets of how it works and how it doesn't work, and is the person who gets an answer quicker than your research will. But they also then have the challenge of trying to think outside the box when they only know the box. Yeah. It's the dog that finally gets out of the house that's been trying to do for years and then goes, well, I don't know where I'm going, so I'll just stay here. Yeah. You're like, come on. And the CRM point of view is the one I've seen so much, where when I was kind of consulting and things like that, a lot of it, work was through like word of mouth. Person like, oh, you worked on this. Anytime you know anything about this, I'm like, I can work it out. And then you do like a 3-month project, and at one, I was basically going in. They'd be like, oh, we brought in Salesforce. It just doesn't seem to have made a difference. I'm like, congratulations, you paid a lot of money for a fantastic platform for no reason. Not saying it won't be the reason you want, and no slight on Salesforce, but you never worked out what you were trying to do. Somebody has magpied you where you've like, ooh, shiny object, let's go and get that and spend money. That's going to improve things. You're like, it might, but you haven't set it up properly and it isn't working and people don't know how to use it. It's not changing anything from whatever your old process was. Like changing process or implementing process for process sake changes nothing, and in a lot of ways makes it worse, because people then stop stressing or stop remembering the things they had to before, because like, oh, Salesforce has got it. And like, how did it get it? Did you put it in? Then it doesn't have it.
Yes.
And that's why the last piece of everything we're trying to do is automation, where as soon as you're relying on humans to make the machine work through multiple phases they don't understand, is where it's going to fail. You want humans to be the start point and the end point.
Yes.
And ideally nothing else, unless it's like pushed to act.
Yeah.
Confirmed, done. Like, if you do it that way, with the things that can be automated, you're freeing up their time, their expertise, their brain power to do the things that can't work that way. You know, in a hotel space, that's dealing with guests. You can't automate how a guest is going to be. Honestly, at a lot of hotels, it's the same issues you'll visit, but, you know, the way that the front desk agent deals with Linda, deals with Kate, deals with Vikram is going to be different.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily automate that, but I can automate how you get the data about the person so that when they come and ask you the question about their bill, it's right there.
Yeah. I think that's super, super important. And all these things is understanding like the why and mapping out first. Like you have to do the manual process to really figure out automation. Like automation is great. Automation is supposed to make things quicker, but it's not supposed to replace things, right? Like it's supposed to set you up where you can have scalable, repeatable processes to make things more efficient and better experiences. But if it's not properly mapped out and properly handled, then it's automation for automation's sake, and it never works. And
or if you automate something that doesn't work, you're like, congratulations, you're now doing it wrong faster.
Yeah,
that's not actually better. Like,
no.
And that's where I was at a roundtable a month or so ago on generative AI, where so many people were just saying like, oh, we're investing in generative AI because basically FOMO. And I'm like, you have no real use case and it's not actually solving a real world problem. You just don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
Good luck wasting all of your R&D budget.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's something that, you know, I'm just where we're leveraging some AI tools, and we obviously do a lot of automation.
Yeah.
But all of our automation came from years of manual work, right? Like going through that process and doing all that. And, you know, if you talk to some of our early support reps, they're like, yeah, we used to manually do some of this stuff because we knew that we always wanted to automate it. And that's what we were built off of, was automation. But in order to build the automation logic, do the manual logic. And I think that is such an impactful piece. And, you know, I love that you use the front desk kind of agent experience, because the guest experience is important. And what you'll see is when hoteliers and management companies and hospitality groups have the right stacks in place and they empower the actual hotel. At the end of the day, we're looking at, like, you know, obviously you have your KPIs for the executive level, right? That your CEO sees, and looking at the overall big picture. But at the end of the day, for a hotel to be profitable, well-run, hospitable, is, do they have the systems in place? Do they have the process in place? Are they empowered to do the job they need to do? And when you can simplify those things and make it easy for them to be having these conversations, they win every time. And that's where the data unification really matters in an organization where you have 180 plus hotels with different brands and different franchises and whatever, but you want to create an experience of, you stayed at an MCR hotel.
Yeah. And I think part of the challenge is also the communication around it.
Yeah.
A lot of people hear automation in the same way they hear AI or robotic or, whatever buzzword or tech word is used, and think all they're trying to do is save money and replace jobs. I'm not going to pretend that isn't the case in some places. And that, again, is cross-industry. But at least the way I'm approaching a lot of it is it's not from that being the purpose. The real use case is, think of it from the frontline person. You're a head housekeeper.
Yeah.
How can we track the rooms need to be cleaned, whether it's done, where my staff are they turning up, who's on the rota, and do they have all the inventory they need to be able to do their job?
Yeah.
Here's lots and lots of bits of paper. Here's an Excel spreadsheet. Here's 20 emails. Not really helping them do their job. So all of the challenges and all the complaints that person will have are still going to continue. You put in something like a system or a tool or an application that helps them count inventory and auto order.
Yeah.
And you're doing that based on data from not just one hotel, but from all of the hotels in comparable markets and comparable brands and quality level and size, all items that we're trying to collect in our centralized data. It makes their job easier. We're not trying to fire them and put, a robot that you see in like Stop and Shop there going around cleaning. You're literally just trying to be, hey, you no longer have to now be an expert in Excel to work out those things.
Yeah.
Your job is to train your staff, improve them, or, tell them when they're doing things wrong. And you don't have to worry about anything else. The rest is just done. You go to this cupboard, there's always pillows, there's always towels. It's automated. And rather than just, hey, can we collect all the data on what we do? It's, and how's this helping solve the real world problem?
Yeah.
And there's thousands of those in every single industry and every walk of life where if that's your goal, you can do all of that to make the job better, to make it easier. And as a byproduct, you'll save money and you'll keep better quality staff and all of the kind of knock-on effects of it.
And I love how you kind of, life is a series of problems, complex problems that we have to solve. And so every time you solve one process problem, it opens up opportunities to be more creative and do more things, which comes with more challenges, which I think this is where whenever we get all scared that AI is going to take over and some people are going to lose jobs, but it's going to open up new jobs, new opportunities, new challenges, new ways of doing things. And that's the exciting piece that can really open up kind of the door. I know we could talk forever on this stuff, but what are you most excited about as we look at the hospitality, data unification, the things that are happening? What are you most excited for, kind of trends that you're seeing as you're kind of deep in the thick of it for the industry as we think about hospitality as a whole, technology and hospitality?
I think it's been bandied around for as long as I've been either tangentially related to the hospitality industry. My wife, prior to her job, was working for a large hospitality firm based in Asia, and they were saying the same thing: is modernization. People have been talking about it, again, in every industry forever, but it was also just a buzzword. I think what we're seeing now from the big brands and the big tech players is not just the need for it, but an actual path forward to doing so. So the move to the cloud and, Marriott's Power of M and Hilton switching to new PMSs, there seems to be a clear idea, and whilst every brand and every company is approaching it differently with potential different end goals, overall, they're essentially trying to do the same thing, which is kind of just remove the red tape in a lot of ways to be able to say, look, here are the tools you need to be able to be successful, as opposed to here's our way, go and do it. Now, there's a lot of challenges, and I'm seeing a lot more of the big one that's coming down is identity management and security, which in hospitality is just light years behind. And we're personally trying to work on some things that helps MCR with that. But I think the brands, that's the thing I'm excited to see how they try to do that, because it's a massive problem. And their kind of current solutions are very restrictive and not actually helpful. So I'm excited to see how they do that, because a lot of the modernizations they're bringing are necessary, but not particularly groundbreaking. It's following other industries and things like that. There's an opportunity in an industry like hospitality with so many people in the workforce from so many different walks of life and such a high turnover to do something actually quite interesting with that. So I think that's one of my I don't know if I'm excited for it or petrified, but I'm certainly intrigued to see how that comes along. And every time I meet anybody who's kind of like a player in there, I'm like, I just like kind of bend their ear a little bit and be like, so any input you want to give me here and see where you're going? And that's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, I like how you say modernization, right? And with the modernization comes data integrity. Once data integrity comes data governance, data security. And that's a really interesting thing, especially when you still look at those that are on-prem, legacy, moving to the cloud, and all those things. And I do think you made a good point that the hospitality space is the way travel and the way that we travel to places with, whether it's business, whether it's pleasure, whether it's the leisure travel. Some people still hate QR codes for ordering systems. They want to order off a menu. Some love having a full-on concierge. Some people choose to go to fully automated hotels where you barely interact with a human. And we have all those options for us. And whether you're, somebody who's digitally savvy or not, you have brands and hotels, and all of them are working to capture that time and attention and really figuring out like what that space in the market is. And I think that's an interesting thing that the market is doing as a whole. And I will say, you being European Scotsman, Europe has done a much better job than the US at modernization and moving faster to more innovative solutions around webhooks and APIs in the cloud, where here with the bigger brands, a little slower, because when you think about all that data and the fact that you have to keep data for a minimum of 7 years of anyone that comes through a hotel, all those rules, it is scary. Hence your challenge of 180 hotels and all that data, so on and so forth. So I'm really excited. I think it's a really fun challenge. You're seeing a lot of movement in the industry, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, hotel brands making big changes and moves, partnerships forming. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see. And it is a fun challenge. And it is going to be interesting to see, with all the movement happening this year, how that all gets captured and how people really leverage the power of technology to better increase and better make that a smoother process.
For sure, yeah. And something I think is going to be fascinating is to see how the big players approach it. And hospitality, you think of hotels, you think of various travel, and you think of airlines. And I do not think airlines could have done a worse job than they have over the past 20 years. No one likes flying anymore. The biggest growth seems to be people finding ways to do cheap private flights because it's so much better of an experience. And hospitality can't go the same way, because if Hilton and Marriott and IHG and all of the big brands go one way and people don't like it, there are other options. So it will just screw those companies. When it comes to the flight, like, I can't start an airline and really do anything differently because there's so much regulation and everything. So it's going to be interesting to see how the big brands really approach it. If they go insular and try to be like, oh no, you can only do things the X brand way, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah, not at all.
Because it prevents invention, I guess, in the industry, and that will eventually have a knockdown to a worse guest experience. And the reason why it's an interesting industry is it's always going to be a growth industry when it has downtimes, because, you know, maybe we have a global pandemic, or maybe there's an economic pandemic, or whatever it is. It's going to come back because humans in their nature want to travel and experience things. So you've got almost a guaranteed market. It's just, can you get their market?
Yeah.
And it's going to be really fascinating to see the approach that they take. And, you know, Marriott's whole, the power of M, in theory is, here is to, you know, people like ourselves, here's everything you need to be a great Marriott provider.
Yeah.
If they do that right, then they've hit an absolute winner. If it goes wrong and it's very restrictive, that's going to cause issues. Yeah. So I'm very intrigued to see how they all approach it differently.
Yeah.
And I put everything back down to sport. It's the exact same. You get a team and they try one way and it doesn't work. Person gets fired and they start again. Versus, you know, someone else goes, you know, the Moneyball method, which is everywhere in every sport now. I'm going to be like, how are you guys going to do this? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think maybe we'll do an end of the year podcast where we kind of come back to some of these topics and see, one, how the project's doing, but two, how the market's changed. It'll be interesting. Yeah. Kyle, I appreciate you for jumping in. And honestly, this is one of the things I love talking about. It's kind of technical and whatnot, but I think it's so unique and some really cool things that are happening. And it's really cool that you have put so much time, energy, and effort to kind of creating that base layer with your small team. And I know your team's growing slowly but surely as this project continues to get bigger and bigger.
Getting there.
But we're excited to be partnered with you, and thank you for coming down. It's great to, you know, I know usually I come to your office on the 86th floor of the One World Trade, but coming to Soho, switch it up a little bit. Obviously, never a bad thing to walk through Soho on your way home.
Exactly.
How can listeners find you? How can they get in touch if they've got questions or things of that nature?
Sure. Yeah. I don't answer my phone ever, so that's not a useful way to get in touch with me.
True.
But, you know, LinkedIn's probably the best method. I have multiple emails and 5,000 emails a day, so it's not always the best way. I think LinkedIn's probably the best way, but yeah, anybody has any way wants to reach out, asking questions, happy to
Awesome.
connect.
I'll make sure to link Kyle's LinkedIn in the show notes. So if you're interested, get in touch with him, add him on LinkedIn and definitely reach out. He is, weirdly enough, he's actually very available and he will get back to you, just in different methods. Somebody who knows very well. But we appreciate you, Kyle. Thanks for coming down. We'll definitely be, you know, chatting again soon and love to have you back. I think one of the things we should do is when Jacob's finally back in town for a hot bit, the three of us just like chop it up. I think we could cover some fun topics in hospitality. Sure. So we'll set that one up. Until next time, y'all, stay well. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review Hospitable. If you have guests, topics, things you want to cover, you want to join yourself, please let us know. We would love to chat with you. Until next episode, take care.